I know this was, I don't want to say, this was arguably a time-sensitive build. You guys thrashed to get this done for the World Time Attack Challenge in 2016, I want to say?
15. The debut event was World Time Attack in 2015. We struggled, man. It was a tough event.
I know it was a thrash.
But we ended up getting the R35 Pro Class record. That's what we went down there and set out to do. We barely got it. 32. It's not a time we're proud of by any means, but still, it was the fastest R35 Pro Class time. And
still stands today.
Front subframe to rear subframe, it's all stock. We have stock shock towers, stock subframes, stock pickup points. And
important to point that out. Why is that?
In the spirit of Time Attack, Time Attack's based off production cars. You know, anybody can go to Porsche or Audi or McLaren and buy a pre-built GT3 car, and they're wicked fast, and they have millions of dollars of development already in it. Well, that's nice for those guys that can do that. You know, we started with a car that cost us $20,000 to get the better chassis. And over years and a lot of man hours, we transformed it into one of the fastest production cars on earth. So our primary goal has always been to be the fastest R35. In pursuing that, we've actually picked up some overall track records. So kind of a cool thing that happens besides our main goal.
You guys had bad luck at WTAC. Had to swap out. You lost a piston, I believe. Had to swap out.
Burned a hole in the top of the piston. Yeah, my bad.
Had to build. You guys took a stock VR38 and dropped it in this monster and ran with that?
Borrowed it.
I love that. You borrowed it just for the event.
The guy didn't want to sell it, and we didn't want to put any boost to it, so we turned it all the way down. We were probably less than stock horsepower on it because we didn't want to scatter a borrowed engine. He really didn't want that to happen. So worked overnight, put in a stock engine, and just made some laps. And we didn't know we set the record we got there to do until we were drinking sake on the rear wing at the end of the race. So we were quite relieved to look at the time charts and realize that we did in fact accomplish our goal, but it was such a pain in the ass to get there. We didn't even realize we had done it.
Completely. Now that was the first event. You guys have also run at Pikes Peak with another car and with this car with, I believe, Frank.
Correct.
You took Frank there, the previous R35 that you ran, which was sort of started as like sort of a weekend Nay Plus Ultra track car that just sort of went crazy from there.
That car was originally built for like wheel to wheel, and then we won a 6-hour endurance race. So we were doing endurance racing and wheel to wheel racing, and we were having a good time with it, but ultimately we knew it would make a pretty damn good Time Attack car. So, but we were that far into the build, we said, we got to start over. So we contacted our buddy Andrew Brilliant, who does aerodynamic design, and he started the entire package because we made so many mistakes with the first chassis that we'd have to undo. We said, well, let's start with the aero first and build everything else around that package.
So at Pikes Peak, there's two things you're dealing with. You're dealing with a much longer time because essentially the longest lap times, which you've just proven that at 2:07, like a 2-minute lap is a long lap for Time Attack. You're looking at a 10-minute plus lap, or hopefully sub 10-minute lap at Pikes Peak. You're also dealing with elevation, and then there's lower density, which limits the amount of cool air that you're getting to the car, which doesn't make sense to me because it's really cold at Pikes Peak, but I know nothing about science. I just know that it's cold, so it should be cold air, but the lower air density obviously
There's no air.
There's no air up there.
No air.
With the thin air, you're dealing with that. You're also dealing with obviously taking away power from the turbochargers. But
for this last event we ran, we ditched the front radiator and ran just the rears. We didn't have enough for weight distribution.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And we didn't have enough cooling.
Oh, not enough cooling. So
it was okay, we made it through, but we could tell that if it was a 3-minute lap, we maybe would have, turned into some issues, or if it was a high boost map, maybe we would have run into some issues there. But, in the name of developing it, we're trying to make it better, and it's like, okay, we took 50 pounds off the nose, which is great, but now we're limited to Time Attack standards again. So there's no airflow into the rear. We did some ducting and some little pieces. We really relied on the fans, but ultimately the only thing that saved us was the raw volume of water in the cooling system. Back to Pikes Peak setup, we'll have 3 radiators in it. We'll go back to Pikes Peak one day, but it's not on the calendar for this year. We're running Sierras there. I want to run this thing at Pikes Peak. I want to be the fastest R35 there. It's just not going to be this year, but it will be in the future.
Love to hear that. I noticed these things. I read Mike Kojima wrote a really cool thing after the speed ring thing where you guys trounced on a little company named HKS there with this car, taking out someone. he can't use the nickname anymore because there is someone better than no one better. So.
It's SOB now.
Yeah.
So that was a childhood dream come true. You know, I grew up reading the magazines, and you know, I worked at a shop that imported JDM cars, and to be on the same track with Knob and HKS was amazing. But to come out and get the win was really what the team needed, and the car was in not 100% form. Completely. So it was pretty magical moment to be there that day.
Completely. It's sad to see it limping, but also challenging. I heard you had a blowout too.
We had a tire blowout because we're running 180 miles an hour on the banking with tons of downforce. Knob was going 202.
Yeah. Wow.
He was boogieing. So I'm sitting there just getting my ass kicked for 2 days, and we pulled it off like last session. You know, it was like one of those stories that people wouldn't believe, but the stopwatch doesn't lie. You know, we came away with the win. We walked away with $20,000 cash, and honestly, if we didn't have that cash, this program would have been scrapped. I was that upside down.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you, Speed Ring and HKS for giving
Seriously,
you know.
We were heavily leveraged
to see that.
Yeah.
Interesting now to see that wasn't even one of their scuba record breakers.
Right.
But it was, you know, pretty much, I would say by HKS standards, okay, 1,300 horsepower R35, not necessarily mild, but by HKS standards, somewhat of a more mild build. But still, to hear that car going 202 around the bank at Auto Club, really scary too, really sketchy too. I mean, I haven't seen those tuner car-esque speeds since Randy Grube brought Super GT, and those quite weren't tuner cars, you know.
That was the first Japanese car race that I went to. That was a turning point for me at that same track.
Yes, exactly.
And they put the chicane.
They had to put the chicane in because their tires couldn't handle it either.
It was eye-opening for me. I was a young mechanic, just like eager, you know, 18 years old when I went to that race. So
you were 18 years old.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't even want to admit how old I was when I was at that race. I know nothing about aerodynamics, but when I look at those stagnation plates, which a lot of top motorsport teams, it looks aerodynamically completely unsound to me. I don't know how aerodynamics works, and it trips me out. But now when I see the new Infinity Wing stuff that Andrew's doing, it's amazing. I also know that the Infinity Wing works with a lot of aero on the bottom, which is like a crazy diffuser, which I've noticed that you guys don't utilize in the back here. And this is also because of the rules, correct?
The reality is it's dirty air by the time it's at the diffuser. So many people spend a ton of time doing diffuser.
Trying to clean up the air, so to speak, by the time it gets out.
We've run multiple diffuser configurations. We've had Andrew run multiple diffuser configurations. And unless you're taking it full advantage of like real tunnels that start midway in the car, the diffuser's not helping as much as people may think. So we want to make front downforce with the splitter, we want to make rear downforce with the wing, and we want to have the flattest floor possible. So the transitional stuff from the rear diffuser, we haven't seen the results that we need to justify spending a bunch of time on that stuff. So we'd much rather upgrade to Infinity Wings on the front splitter, and if we need more rear downforce, we'll just bring the rear wing up in the air. But it's been a very efficient package.
What about at Auto Club? Because not to tell tales out of class, but I heard Mike Warfield came in and like actually trimmed your car out, helped you trim it out a little bit to help you get to the record
He
lap.
Suggested it, and Taniguchi suggested it.
Really? Okay.
I bet he regrets that suggestion now. But at the time, he was kicking our ass, and he was like, come on, let's. And the reason we trimmed it out at Auto Club, one, you're on a NASCAR oval, so we had
create more mechanical grip than aerodynamic.
There was
grip
over
with
30 seconds of wide open throttle time. But truly, the reason we didn't, this package was designed around having 1,000+ horsepower. We were not making 1,000 horsepower at Auto Club. We were desperate, so we pulled the upper element, we pulled the canards, we pulled the barn doors on the splitter as a last-ditch effort.
Just to find some speed there.
But I tell you what, I drove this with some of the front aero off of it at COTA at the very end, toying around with some of you Honda guys, doing some drag racing, and the car was not good. It was just crazy what you do to the aero balance. They're so sensitive at that level that when I went out and ran those demo laps, it was there's no way I could have set that record again. I couldn't have matched that time. Wow. Even with 200 more horsepower, it wouldn't have matched that time.
It's funny that you mentioned that the aero's built for 1,000 horsepower. It's crazy now, me as an old school time attack guy and struggling to keep up with what you young kids are doing these days. Stay off my front lawn, by the way. Nowadays, it's almost like you're building a drag car that also creates downforce.
You're
too.
100% right. I wish we would have started with a drag car.
Never used to be that way.
It's a drag race car, and so much of what we've done with this thing is drag race cars are meant to be worked on. People pull the front clip off with 4 bolts. Everything's replaceable. You can swap engines and stuff quickly. And that's what Time Attack's becoming. It's drag racing with some corners. And we really should have just started with a drag car and then worked back. But we took what, I'm a road racer through and through. That's, I love to wheel race. But I'm also, the other half of me is a car builder. And so you take those two things and it's Time Attack.
Completely.
Because drag racing is not my thing. It's like, that's for engine builders. And I'm a driver. Like, all I've ever wanted to do is drive race cars. And so I get to build the car, I get to drive the car, and build it to the 10/10ths, and that's where Time Attack is. But yeah, we should have started with the drag car because that's what it's becoming in the pro class.
Way back in the day, famously, and I hate to even admit this because I love you and I hate you, boy, but Christian Rados said that. So it's nothing but drag racing with corners, and I'm like, you're completely wrong.
Yeah.
You don't need to make 1,500 horsepower and then create 6,000 pounds of downforce. Yeah. And now I'm watching what the RP968 is doing. That engine is making ridiculous amounts of horsepower. It's also ridiculous amounts of money. Yeah. But the downforce that Andrew's creating out of these cars is nuts.
We've never run full boost on track. Well, I take that back. We ran full boost for half a lap at Road Atlanta, and we blew something up.
I know, and that's when you were chasing Jeff Westphal and Mike Warfield.
We were set to have an epic battle.
Such a good. That was such a good. Oh my God, one of the best Time Attack battles, because at the time, you and the team were relatively unknown.
Oh yeah.
And Warfield and Westphal were
established, dude.
Double W's there, and they were just cranking laps. Yeah. They were struggling, you were struggling, and you guys were trading blows back and forth. Yeah. One of the most awesome weekends of my life to see that. I think they set the record at the time was a 120.1, and you were at a 121.5. You were right there. And even before that, you even held the record a couple times going back and forth. So they're like, well, we're going to turn it up. And you said, well, I'm going to turn it up too. Yeah. And I remember you went down that one long straight and never came back.
Nope.
So, I know.
It was good. And that was the only time that this car, I'll tell you, the horsepower is great and it makes 1,200 on the dyno. We hope to use that on the track one day. But the first time I drove this car, I thought it was broken because of all the drag. By far the most impressive thing is the downforce. The horsepower is all right, the grip's all right, the downforce is the most impressive thing. I've driven high downforce formula cars and sports racers. They don't hold a candle to this. But it was so foreign to me that I thought the car was broken. So the first time that I thought, hey, this drag to downforce ratio feels right is when it made 1,200 horsepower. Wow. I went out and ripped down the back straight, and I was like, this is how they're supposed to feel. Every R35 drag race video you look at, that it's like warp speed, like that's what it was again.
Speed, yep.
But didn't even make one full lap. I've gone to Pikes Peak 5 years in a row. In 17, we showed up with the best possible car that we've ever had. The thing was so sorted, and that's when the crankshaft let go. And it's like, I did everything. I can't. Aside from buying a brand new crankshaft, I couldn't have prepared any better. So it was really disheartening after that. And we tried to go earn some money at the second speed ring, and we hit a wall. So
not an aero wall, not a development wall, but you literally, you had the brakes let go. I want to see you were going a $135 when the brakes let go.
136. But
136. Who's what's a mile per hour between friends? And at Gingerman, was it at Gingerman?
No, it's a small track called M1 Concourse in Detroit.
Oh, that's right.
And we had a massive brake failure there after an engine fire and all sorts of drama, and it was a race that we really shouldn't have been at with a wounded car, but the $20,000 prize money.
Calling your name.
Yeah, it enticed us. So we knew we had a pretty good chance at that, but honestly, the worst race weekend of our lives that weekend, and my closest near-death experience. I had a big wreck at Pikes Peak in 15. The brake failure at 135 was
I would
pretty
say
gnarly. So after that, we parked the car. It sat there untouched, collecting dust for a year and a half. And if it wasn't for Jason at Super Lap putting this mega event together, it would still be parked. So shout out to those guys for trying to push the envelope with Time Attack.
Completely.
And it inspired us. It got some other people excited about the program. And it wasn't just LYFE. It wasn't just Kyle. It was everybody reaching out to us, making sure that we were going to make the event. So whether it was tires or hard parts or fuel, whatever we needed, we had a lot of support in getting to that big first super lap battle at COTA.
Well, let's just say in a perfect world, with the full AMS Alpha package, which a lot of people discount. I think a lot of people would discount, like if people are watching this saying, can't even get the engine program together. People don't realize that we were talking about earlier, drag racing, or essentially right now what's really hot in the R35 community is standing mile cars, like the runners and the half mile specials and everything. Those cars do 200 miles an hour plus, 270, 280 now, in a standing mile and a standing half mile. And they rebuild the engines like a Top Fuel thing, like quite frequently. So you guys are kind of butting up against that same world. So you're essentially using the AMS Alpha engine program, Kelford cams and all that stuff, and building to that spec. So you guys had, I want to say it was a custom crank first, but then you also had a Greddy crank in it, correct?
Yeah, well, so, you know, everybody builds parts for everybody else in this industry and private labels and this and that. So supposedly it was the Greddy and HKS crank manufacturer that built it for us, and it worked great until it didn't, you know. So we're looking at a few different engine options and working with Tony down at T1. He's got some tons of experience. Those guys are making 3,000 horsepower on stock blocks. It's just out of this world. So we didn't even make top 20 on his dyno. We made 1,000 wheel on his dyno. It wasn't even top 20. He got sick of scrolling. So, you know, it's a true testament to how good the engine's been. And the engine problems we have really haven't been engine related themselves. It's been other components. You know, the engine we burned down in Australia, my bad. I left E85 in the fuel lines, and it gummed up sitting in a shipping container for a couple months going to Australia. And we had
fuel starvation.
Yeah, in one cylinder, in one hole. So
that's what burned down the cylinder in
yeah,
Australia.
we should have pumped pump gas through it and run the engine on it and cleared everything up. But that's downside of ethanol, and take full responsibility for that. Some of the other ECU related issues we've had with the Motec is they didn't have all the upgrades necessary for the level of integration that we needed. Tony at T1 sorted that out with the latest Motec package, and it's never been better.
So now the other thing is I want to say you guys are working with Dodson on the internals for this.
Yeah, the gearbox, Dodson was the answer. Like we broke 6 gear sets. Wow. And I won't mention who manufactured those gear sets, but I'll tell you Dodson saved our ass. Because we were having to carry a spare gearbox everywhere, and we pretty much planned on replacing it on any given weekend. So yeah, Dodson makes an extreme duty gear set and clutches, and it's top-notch stuff. We have broken 0. Plenty of passes on the dyno over 1,000 wheel, lots of track time, 0 failures. So you know, everybody's kind of catching up with the level that we were trying to achieve, whether it's gearbox or aero or ECU. It's all kind of coming to where we can show, you know, how capable this package is. One of the biggest things about the high aero cars is finding a balance between low speed grip and high speed keeping the car off the ground. So that was a huge part of WiseFab's development, is, you know, taking their traditional road kit and converting it to an extremely high downforce car. So we know that this package is good for a street car all the way up to the level of racing that we're doing. The seat of the pants can only get you so far, then you got to rely on hard data.
Completely. Now you get to a point where you might not have the shock settings, spring rates, or the valving correct when you're creating too much downforce, and you're essentially just smashing the car into the ground. You're not having any active suspension travel, correct?
We get to that point.
Yep.
Yeah. Eastern Creek or City Motorsports Park, turn 1 is extremely fast. It's like 160 mile an hour fast.
Oh, God.
And you're on the bump stops, you're on the ground. The car, every single component of the car is, you know, millimeters off the ground. So you essentially have 2 different cars. You have the car as it operates at low speed and the car as it operates at high speeds, and how you blend those 2 worlds is really up to the engineer, whoever's setting up the car. And you know, we're a relatively small race team. We don't have high dollar engineers. It's me saying yes, the car is better or worse, and you know, us trying to figure it out after.
Okay.
Get out of here, Tom.